What's up, YouTube? Capital G here. Got a very interesting discussion that I think a lot of you guys will like. I think that this is going to be one where there's a lot of debate, and I think it will be fairly divisive. I can't see everybody having the same opinion on this. Full disclosure, I got this idea from the Yu-Gi-Oh! Reddit forum, so shout outs to Reddit coming up with really good ideas. And the question in the topic really is, would people use Reckless Greed if it was a spell card instead of a trap? I think Reckless Greed is one of those cards that it finds itself in a very bad position. It has a fairly high ceiling, especially if you can combo multiple Reckless Greeds at a time, but because of the nature of the card and because of the nature of just the game of Yu-Gi-Oh! Right now, people just deem it too slow. In fact, DZeef had a whole video about like Jar of Greed and why like these trap cards that I guess are similar to it, whether they be like super obscure or something like Common Charity, which I might play on my live stream when I'm like fucking around with vanilla zombies, to much better cards like Jar of Greed that don't really have any strings attached. They don't see play right now because in this era, the game is just way too fast. And I believe off the top of my head, the last time that Reckless Greed actually saw like a significant amount of high level play was back during Zexal. This was when Mermail were really big, and I believe that it was Pat Hoban who played Upstart Goblin and Reckless Greed in his Mermail, and the mindset was basically, I want to get to my power cards faster than my opponent, so even if I have to give up draw cards down the line, that doesn't matter if I hit my cards early and I end up winning because of that. So it's basically just a way to outspeed your opponent, but I feel like that doesn't really translate all that well right now, because if you look at just the fact that it's a trap card, you guys know how much of Yu-Gi-Oh! Is just decided within the first damn turn. It doesn't matter whether you're going second or first, whether your opponent makes that colossal board and you evenly match them and it's like good luck trying to recover from that, or your opponent has, a play and they're trying to go off and you've got the Maxi, they don't have the Ash, and it's like, all right, well, I basically lose because you're going to get 30 cards and I just have my field. Chances are you're going to be able to crack it. It really feels like the turn one emphasis is so high in Yu-Gi-Oh! Maybe higher than it's ever been. And that's why I think that a hypothetical like this could just it could definitely change the entire landscape of Yu-Gi-Oh! So let's just say, and we won't go like revisionist history where we say, well, Cap, if Reckless Greed would have been a spell, it would have dominated in this format and this deck wouldn't have won and that. No, there's really no point of constantly looking back to other eras of Yu-Gi-Oh! Because it's really just not that applicable. Let's just say that Konami decides to print a new card in Flames of Destruction called, I don't know, like Calculated Greed or something like that. You know what I mean? And it just says, draw 2 cards, skip your next 2 draw phases, and it's a spell card. Now, one of the first questions that I actually had to ask myself is this a hard once per turn? First off, do you believe that Reckless Greed as a spell would need to be a hard once per turn? I kind of feel like it has to be, right? Because if it doesn't, oh my god, I see too much potential, not for it to just see like a lot of meta play with, decks like Trickstars and other decks like Pendulums. I see a lot of these like really gimmicky cheese degenerate decks like Exodia coming out like, wait a minute, we get to draw 2 cards instantly? I'll take that. Have fun not getting a turn, capital G. Like, I see too many cheese decks really coming out the woodwork. But even if it was a hard once per turn, which obviously would limit the power of the card because it kind of shuts down the ability of you being able to go reckless off of reckless, you know what I mean? If you have multiple reckless, even with it being a trap, it's still strong. But even let's say that we shut down that, right? I look at this card and I still think it could just be monumental, because when you think of Yu-Gi-Oh! Right now, especially if you think of like hyperlink decks like Spiral, or let's even take Spiral out of the equation, because Spiral I feel like is a dead man walking. I feel like it's living on borrowed time. Within a week or two, or whenever we get the new ban list, everyone expects the deck to be dead. But let's take another hyperlink deck, right? Let's take World Chalice. World Chalice, especially with its new card in Flames of Destruction, the Searchable Monster Reborn, that deck can pop off probably higher than almost any deck in Yu-Gi-Oh! Outside of the like FTK degenerate, Plant Link FTK and shit. You're thinking about being able to drop like a Firewall Dragon, maybe a Gameciel that's like a walking Solemn Judgment, possibly having like a Archlord Christia as well, so your opponent can't even special summon. Like, you think that deck would not give up 2 of its draws later in the duel to cement its turn 1 like presence, to make sure that it has everything that it needs, to make sure that it gets that Brilliant Fusion, to make sure that it gets the Soul Charge and the Venus, all the cards that basically amass the uncrackable board that the deck does? Yeah, I think I would 100% be willing to do that. And you even look at other strong decks like Trickstar. I think that if you were running Pot of Desires and you're running this new Reckless Greed that's a spell card, I just think of those two cards being used in the same turn and going, oh my god, like woo-wee, that's going to, like, I don't really think it even matters if you don't get any more draws. You get all the good cards that you need, whether that be like playmakers, like starter cards like Gofu, or, you know, big play, knockout, or home run cards like Scapegoats, or you just get hand traps, you get Solemns, you get cards that stop your opponents. I kind of feel like, considering the game is so fast, I think that this card would actually just be one of those cards that you run because you need to get your power cards so early. And that actually leads me to another question, and that question is, do you believe that this hypothetical Reckless Greed would ever need to be placed on the Forbidden Unlimited list? And I'm not talking about, you know, let's be reasonable here. I'm not talking about like, oh, Cap G, just ban the card now. Like, come on, man, let's be reasonable. Talking about maybe placing it at 2 or limited status. I think, like, a lot of times when I try and look at a card and think, does it need to be banned or limited, I look at like the downside. I look at, you know, pretty much the floor of the card. Then I look at the ceiling. The ceiling of this Reckless Greed is obviously high. Draw 2 cards in Yu-Gi-Oh! That is pretty damn good, but I think that it's very comparable to something like Pot of Desires. The interesting thing is, I think that in a vacuum, especially for the short term, it's actually a lot better than Pot of Desires. Pot of Desires is a fantastic card. That's why you're seeing it be played in so many cards, but man, there are just so many damn times where I activate that fucking card and I'm playing a deck like Trickstars and I banish my 1 copy of Lilybell, or I banish like 2 copies of Reincarnation, and I'm just like, just fuck me now. It wasn't even worth the 2 cards that I got. You know, Lilybell late game cheese is like super real for Trickstars, and it can be like a win condition. And when you're playing these decks and you're like banishing searchable cards, combo pieces that are important, man, sometimes that can end up being the reason that you cannot win a game. And I look at this Reckless Greed and I'm thinking, if I just get 2 draws and I don't have to sacrifice anything this turn, what am I losing out on? I understand that there is that super low ceiling of, man, this card might backfire, and if I can't make the most of this turn, then I might be locking myself out of the game, at least temporarily. But when I think about being able to get 2 draws without being, you know, without having to like gut my deck or banish a bunch of cards that I'll never get back, that is tremendously powerful. And I want to know how people weigh that ceiling versus that floor, if people don't really see that floor as really that big of a downside, because I kind of feel like whatever you believe about Pot of Desires, you probably think about this new Reckless Greed. Like, if you're one of the people who thinks, yeah, Cap, Pot of Desires should probably go to 2, or maybe it should go to 1, or you think that is perfectly fine, I think that you'll probably feel the same way about this Reckless Greed, because it has that same ceiling, but the floor is obviously there. I actually wonder if people think that the floor of not drawing 2 cards is, you know, better, or is it greater or worse than gutting your deck potentially with the banished 10. And then also, do you guys think that this card would see meta play? I actually believe that it would 100% see meta play, because I just can't get this picture of like playing a deck like Trickstars or playing a deck like Pendulum Magicians, where essentially you can run like everything at 3. Talking about Trickstars right now as they're composed in the TCG, same thing goes with Pendulum Magicians. All of your cards are at 3. I'm looking at potentials of opening Desires and this new Reckless Greed, and just either being able to make such a strong turn 1 board, or being able to like fortify that board. I mean, you think of Trickstars maybe opening with like Candina into Lyco Risk, and maybe setting like a Reincarnation, having like a hand trap and feeling safe. But what if you could trade in your next 2 draw phases to not only get that same board, but to maybe get like a Solemn Strike and a Scapegoat now? Like, oh my god, that literally becomes the God Hand. How do you lose that duel? And even though you're giving up your next 2 draws, I would say that it's worth it to just get the God Hand and ultimately make it so your opponent can't really do anything. Oh, you have something that I don't like, you know, or, you know, activate that Solemn Strike that I wasn't supposed to have. You do something that I don't, or you're setting, you're being passive. Okay, well, I'm going to flip over this Scapegoat. I'm going to go for a Borreload Dragon. I'm going to do a ton of battle damage, and maybe OTK you, and the 2 cards that I miss out on my draw phase, maybe they are just completely inconsequential. So I just thought that this was an interesting topic, and I don't know, maybe a way that Konami sees this and takes a card that is probably not going to see a lot of meta play, you know, ever again, just, or I guess guess, unless the speed of the game is greatly reduced, and just kind of talk of it in a hypothetical situation. So whatever you guys think, leave it in the comment section below. I think it would be incredibly fascinating if they basically made a Reckless Greed that was a spell card, because I really want to see what type of havoc this card could cause. But whatever you guys think, leave it in the comment section below. Thank you guys for watching. As always, subscribe if you have not already, and turn on that notification bell for daily videos.